Recorded live at the center of the earth. This is Robots from Tomorrow.
Welcome back to Robots from Tomorrow. My name is Greg. Thank you for joining us. One of the reasons I love doing interviews is getting to talk to folks about a lot of different topics and aspects, even in something as relatively focused as comics and comics culture. The drawback to this, although it's one I'm happy to deal with, is trying to come up with at least a mildly coherent game plan for the interview when each guest inspires so many different and perpendicular lines of questioning that my brain demands I tackle. Today's guest is no exception and an excellent case in point. He is a writer, editor, designer. His first creator-owned series, The Forged, is debuting from Image Comics, drawn by Mike Henderson, lettered by Ariana Maher, colored by Nolan Woodard, and co-written by Greg Rucka. The Forged is, quote, an over-the-top pulp adventure of sex, violence, and sci-fi inspired by Conan, heavy metal, and other comics you tried to hide from your parents. We're beaming his signal from Gabby's Olympic Cards and Comics, where his wife, the aforementioned Gabby, runs the best comic shop in the Pacific Northwest, and where he, Rucka, and Henderson will be signing copies of The Forged #1 in all its oversized glory on March 15th from 1 to 6 p.m. He is Eric Trautmann, and I'm thrilled to have him on the show to talk about the book, and I'm sure a laundry list of other topics. Eric, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for setting the bar so high with that one. I feel like I won't live up to it.
No. I mean, did I at least touch on everything?
I've had one of those weird careers, right? Starting in tabletop gaming, moving to video gaming, and then flagrantly abusing my position in gaming to wind up as a comic book writer. It leads to a lot of, as you said, perpendicular lines of questioning. It happens quite frequently in my daily life. So This is no exception. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. So
okay, you have a book coming out. You got a signing. When was the last time you had a book signing?
I don't know. An official signing like this, it's been a while.
Okay.
There was a period where after I had moved on from doing DC Comics work and was doing a lot of work for Dynamite Entertainment, Flash Gordon, Vampirella, Red Sonja, I was writing a lot of books at the same time, and for a series of weird internal reasons, I had to write a lot of them out of order. I was burning out pretty hard, and as a facet of my earlier career in tabletop gaming, I had learned enough graphic design stuff to be a menace, and had kind of transitioned over to that. Greg Rucka and Michael Lark were about to launch Lazarus, and Greg asked me if I wanted to help out laying out their letter column, which turned into a lot of cover design and the cool fake ads.
Yeah.
So and then learning that Michael doesn't particularly enjoy drawing, say, the computer screens in a science fiction series. I'm designing all of those, and it just became throw this to Trautmann, he can do it. Ended up doing so much work for Greg on various titles that I just wasn't writing as much. I mean, still my own personal stuff, but not going out and pitching and trying to land work as a comics writer. So I stopped doing signings and shows because nobody wants to buy their book or get it signed by the guy who picked the font color,
Philistines. But yeah.
I mean, I would do that, but I'm that kind of nerd. I mean, in the store, I frequently sign books. That happens all the time because I'm just always here. Everybody, all the regulars know me, and like, oh, hey, I picked up Lazarus, sign it. Oh, okay, So it's been a while. I would guess the last big one I did was probably the launch of the graphic novel I co-wrote with Brandon Jerwa, illustrated by Steve Lieber for Vertigo, Shooters.
Wow.
Congratulations if you've heard of it.
I swear we're going to get to Forged. See, that first question I asked wasn't the first question I actually had written down, so I'm sort of already kind of a little off the race. Let me see if I can throw in one more. Having not just a retail background, but having that perspective Has that been a help?
That is a tough question to answer. It is my wife's store.
Mhm.
It was her first job when she was 15. She owned the joint by the time she was 18, while putting herself through college a couple years early on an athletic scholarship and then student teaching. Like,
Oh.
she's a hard charger.
Mhm.
I am lazy. I got tired saying that sentence, right?
Yeah.
I guess legally, and I am a part owner of the store, but I go out of my way to make sure that people don't just assume I'm the guy.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So consequently, I'm not dealing with store issues as much as you might think. Earlier in my comics career, I was paying more attention to the industry writ large. I'm
Mhm.
not paying a lot of attention to it these days.
Okay.
Because I'm not aggressively out there pitching
Mhm.
and trying to take on more work. I'm doing the work I enjoy. I'm doing the amount of it I enjoy. I'm not in my 20s and 30s anymore, so
Mhm.
it's hard to maintain that kind of energy level of somebody like great examples are Eric Palicki and David Pepos. I love both of those guys and they do great work. I don't
Mhm.
want to work as hard as those guys are working.
Mhm.
They're just everywhere all the time, and
Yeah.
you know, I have a nice comfortable couch and I want to wrap up in my blanket and take a nap. So there having some having some transparency into how Diamond works,
Mhm.
how print runs work, what kind of percentage of a print run gets absorbed into the book distribution chain rather than the comics direct market system is helpful in setting
Mhm.
reasonable expectations. But I think largely in terms of my own work, I'm spoiled by the experience of my wife's shop.
Mhm.
It is. I know I'm talking about my wife, so there's an expectation that I'm gonna be extra proud
Mhm.
and be effusive in my praise. But she's been doing this for 30 years this summer, 30 years, and it's one of the largest comic shops in North America. It, I mean, I ran a shop back east for a while when I was in my late teens, early 20s, and I am used to the tiny East Coast comic shop experience.
Mhm.
I've never encountered in all my years a store like this one that is so focused on its community, that the community is so supportive of the shop in return, that kind of the brute commerce of it all
Mhm.
is not really a motivating factor. I mean, we do just fine. I don't want to lie and say that we're we're struggling in poverty, but there was a long
Mhm.
period of time where Gab was struggling in poverty, and
Mhm.
a very early location that was only like it was less than 400 square feet. We're sitting on like 14,000 square feet right now.
Mhm. Mhm.
It was in a mall. It was not a well maintained mall. The plumbing burst and flooded her out, just flooded her out. And, you know,
Oh.
she was early enough in that, well, that's it. I can't afford to keep doing this. And her customers uh, donated things that they'd purchased from the store so that she could have merchandise on her shelves and earn some money. Like
Oh.
I can't. This place is just special. It's
Yeah.
different, and that's not to say that other comic shops aren't great. There are plenty of good ones, like just between here and Portland. There's a ton of them.
Mhm.
Um, but I've never encountered a place like this, and it's
Mhm.
all her. But that also means that when I have a book come out, she bangs the drum and people come running. So Shooters, as I said, we launched it
Mhm.
here. And we sold so many copies of that book, and I'm pretty sure we were the only store in North America that sold any copies of that book. So it sets an unrealistic expectation for my success metrics, if you will. So
Uh,
I I just try not to think about that stuff anymore, and I find that's easier. I write my stuff, and I hope people read it.
mhm. I'm sure it'll be a nice little party. It'll get people out and it'll get you and Greg and Mike sort of together at the same time. So
Yeah. I mean, Greg and I see well, not not since COVID so much,
right,
but
right, right.
we generally see each other fairly regularly, and we've gotten together the three of us, me, Greg, and Mike, two or three times at this point, which is
Hmm.
comics is so decentralized these days. It's not
Mhm.
like there's a bullpen anymore. it's rare to bump into your collaborators, and certainly like on my work for hire stuff, like, you had one guy in Chicago and one guy in like Mozambique and this person over, you just never see each other.
Yeah.
So it's great. Like, one of the things I'm enjoying about this being a creator-owned project too is like him or dislike him. It's not a question of the quality of his work, but I have always admired Kevin Smith for taking his early success and creating a system where he just gets to do the thing he loves with the people he loves.
Oh, yeah.
He's working with his friends. And I feel like, certainly since I started working very closely with Greg on the Image stuff, Black Magic and Lazarus and so on, I feel like that's kind of where I'm at. And I get along really well with basically everybody in on those projects. So it makes it feel less like work and more like fun stuff, and you're trying to impress your buddies.
Alrighty. So speaking of impressing your buddies, I'm going to tell everybody, if you're listening or if you're watching this, hit pause, go onto YouTube. I almost said Google. Go onto YouTube, search for The Forged Image Comics, and you will be shown about a 1.5-minute trailer for the book. Go ahead and watch that and then come back here. Okay, so you've done that. Now, Eric, my first question to you, what the hell did we just watch? What can you tell us about the book, I guess?
Sure. The Forged is set some 11, 12, 13,000 years in the future. And the human race basically controls space. She's referred to as the eternal or immortal Empress, and she could very well be tens of thousands of years old. We don't know. The protagonists of the series are an elite military unit. They're called Forged, the Forged. They're all clones, albeit with some deviations to allow for innovation, and so your genetic source line doesn't get stale or corrupted. They're all clones of the Empress, all female, the best of the best of the best of the best. Like the upper 1% of the upper 1% of these hundreds of thousands of clones that are grown to feed this imperial military. If you need to kill a planet, you drop these 5 ladies on a planet and the planet will die. Among them, however, there's an even smaller group of these clones. The upper 1% of the upper 1% of the Forged kind of rarity we call them Cassandras. They're telepathic and precognitive. So they are in many ways the ultimate intelligence asset of the Empress. So the Forged, aside from being the best trained, the toughest, the smartest, the fastest, they're also equipped with horribly powerful power armor, and customized to the team member's role within the squad. So you've got a heavy weapons specialist, you've got the team leader, you've got the sniper, you've got the field medic, and you've got the combat engineer. So our story opens with this group of elite soldiers being dispatched via essentially a star fortress, this giant interstellar spaceship, being sent to a far-flung remote planet where the atmosphere is methane and it rains molten glass, and it's completely inhospitable. A failed terraforming colony, we're told, to recover the black box from a down ship. And this is the equivalent of sending out special forces to help a bunch of kids cross the road outside of school. This is an extremely simple, easy mission, which in more comic speak we know it's none of those things. Things immediately go wrong after arriving at the planet. And I don't want to get too spoilery, but they encounter hostile alien fauna and may have discovered a secret that could topple this eternal empire.
How did the book come together?
Very slowly. Greg and I first started talking about collaborating on a creator-owned book, I think near the end of our CHECKMATE run, which was 2006, 2007, when we were co-writing CHECKMATE. We just wanted to do something pulpy and fun. And at some point, after months and years of discussion, we decided kind of science fiction was probably the way to go, because with the pulp stuff, pulp is a huge genre favorite of writers and artists, but doesn't seem to click with audiences nearly as well. Even Indiana Jones did a fraction of the business of Star Wars, right? and that's your high watermark. For every Indiana Jones, there's a Rocketeer or the Shadow or the Phantom, just these retro properties that everybody loves, but nobody pays for. So we kind of steered away from 1930s style pulp and moved into science fiction, and that informed a lot of things. We tried working with a couple of different artists, and it just wasn't gelling. One artist wasn't into sort of the violence of the setting, and couldn't quite figure out how to make the oversized armor work with the normal sized or even, slightly giant sized main characters that, where do they sit in the suit? Kind of the logistics of it all was just vexing him. And so we were kind of bouncing off that for a while. And we discovered that in our early versions of the script, because I think we went through 3 or 4 iterations of the first issue script. And it had this quality of being kind of ponderous, portentous, kind of full of itself, frankly. And I wasn't feeling it. I don't think Greg was feeling it. And I sat down at one point and wrote in prose form just a short scene of it was in the opening of issue 1. Actually, it's the team sitting around in their squad bay cards. And a lot of the dialogue from that prose scene ended up in the comic, including there's a reference to a particularly gifted gorilla that I kind of want that line on my tombstone, to be honest.
Yeah. Well endowed. Yeah. It would be, yes.
And once that element of humor got injected, because honestly, I mean, for all of the seriousness of the combat, there's a lot of good gallows humor. There's a lot of good banter. Yes. It's not in the issues you read, but the following arc, in addition to some of the biggest action scenes I've ever written and some of the filthiest jokes I've ever put on paper, I also got to write 2 or 3 of like the sweetest, most sentimental moments I've ever put on paper. It's like there's a lot of room with these characters to do the unexpected and to keep it fun and interesting and fresh and different. Despite it being, military science fiction is kind of well-worn territory. Being able to kind of play around with all of that really helped Greg and I kind of focus on what we wanted the book to be. And then, talking to Mike Henderson and getting him involved. And he's got such a good background in doing like horror and macabre stuff, like Nailbiter and there's a, I'm trying to avoid spoiling. There's some scary stuff that shows up fairly late in the first 3 issues that he's the perfect guy for. And I wouldn't have necessarily initially thought of him for science fiction because his work is always so kind of grounded in street level. Yeah, that was a huge surprise that, he really likes doing the sci-fi stuff too. Excellent. That once Mike was part of the team, it was like, okay, we know where we're going. We've got a direction. And that everything kind of fell into place very quickly thereafter. The hardest part is, frankly, Mike draws so damn fast that Greg and I, we were never the fastest guys on the planet in the first place, but I'm speaking purely for myself. I'm a lot slower than I used to be. I spend a lot more time considering every word on the page. So kind of going back into pulpster mode where it's fast fiction. You're trying to write quickly. He's often like, okay, I finished those 10 pages you sent me 9 minutes ago. Could you just pump the brakes just a little, man? It's a great problem to have. He's fast, he's good, and damn it, he's nice too. Like he's just triple threat. So,
let's talk a little bit about Ariana and Nolan for a second.
Well, Nolan came to us via Mike. Mike had worked with him before and liked working with him, and I was like, hey, can I choose my colorist? And Greg and I were like, you're a co-owner of the property. Do whatever you like. If it's somebody you're comfortable working with that you think can do the job, well, we have no reason not to trust that, and I think that the results speak to that. I cannot, for the life of me, remember how I became aware of Ariana. I don't know if Greg had worked with her before on something, or our editor Alejandro Arbona had worked with her or something. But at some point, we just reached out and said, "Hey, we got this project coming up. Do you want to throw your hat in the ring?" And she sent in terrific samples, and she's a dream to work with. I wish we had more regular contact beyond email, and that's something Greg, Mike, and I are talking about, is like kind of doing weekly or monthly, like, hey, let's do a check-in, Discord chat or something, just so we're it isn't just so businesslike. But also, Ariana is so busy that I don't know if that would be a help or a hindrance. We obviously don't want to get in anyone's way. She's just super pleasant and super good at her job and very good at staying in contact. If there's an issue, she'll sing out. It's not, it's very free flowing and open. There's no like weird, oh no, we only talk at certain times or anything like that. If she needs us, she gets a hold of us, and anytime we need her, we get a hold of her. And it's about as pleasant as one could imagine.
Good. It's not like, we don't talk to the help directly. No. We do the thing stuff. I mean, not that it would be, but
I hear all these horror stories from people I know that do these jobs, and I will admit that occasionally, not in the case of the folks that we're working with here, but occasionally I've run into somebody emailing me going, I really hate to reach out like this, but I got this issue and I don't know, okay, then let's fix it. Let's just talk about it. It's like, well, I don't want to step on any toes or get anyone mad. I'm like, it's a question,
Yeah.
So I don't know what's happening out there in the wider comics creation world, but apparently, I see it on Twitter all the time. Like, I think it was Nate Picos the other day, Blambot, was saying, you couldn't mention me in the press release about the book I lettered for you. What's going on with that? Like I was saying earlier about the Kevin Smith thing. I think Greg and I and Mike are like-minded that I think it would be great if we all liked each other. So why don't we just start there and move on? I don't understand that kind of turfiness. I really don't. I think the books will be better if everybody's communicating clearly, and it's clearly not happening everywhere. So hey, lucky us.
Yeah. It's definitely happening here because, this book really does come together. I mean, Nolan, he does a really good job with a lot of worldly but otherworldly things. Unfortunately, I don't have any of the things in front of me at the moment, but I'm remembering, like, just in terms of lettering, a couple of different types of lettering going on, right? Like you've got, neon militaristic captions, setting things, those sort of things. Everything feels of a piece, even though you've got a couple of different types of pieces going together. Even the Forge, they're in their suits, their dialogue is color coded, right? Which is another way of like, hey, we've got these literally faceless protagonists, but we're going to help you really identify them by cues through color or this or that. Pretty quickly into the first issue, and certainly moving forward, it wasn't like, okay, which one is that again? Is that the techie? Is that the bruiser? Is that the leader? You're like, no. You have a pretty good idea, kind of from jump, sort of who everybody is.
That was very much a design consideration right from the jump, because that's always a challenge in a military book, right? Everybody's in uniform, which means they are all identical. We also included cues about their height. They're not all the same height. That was a big thing. And one of the things that we're doing too is at the end of the next arc, they get new armor, because as you've read, their armor gets pretty chewed up in this story. And one of the reasons for that is, when he did his initial designs, Mike had done a few things and he's like, I made life really hard for myself. I'd like to fix that. And sure, and it makes sense that, they're going to get the latest upgrade and when they're out on their next mission. And we were having this conversation today just to further hedge the bets. I had made the observation that there's no need for these folks to be in camouflage. There's no need for them to be in olive drab, or they're a statement. They're a statement of imperial power. You want them to be seen. These aren't your stealth troops. So brightly colored armor, make sure that the enemy can see you coming, so they have plenty of time to wet themselves and surrender. Is a great tactical doctrine. You don't sneak these soldiers into the theater of operations so that they can quietly sneak up and strangle an opponent. It's like, nope, we're here to break your planet. They are big guns, and treating them like I had made the observation that Gundams aren't camouflage. Let them be, that. And I am hoping that as we go on, it will be even easier to tell these characters apart. Mike did great silhouettes. They're all slightly different shapes and sizes, color coding of the lettering. All of that is there to help make sure you can always tell who's who. And then, so that's always kind of an omnipresent thing with us, is how can we make this as clear as possible to the reader? And I'm gratified
Yeah.
that effect worked on you at least. So
Yeah. Job well done. You mentioned Alejandro Arbona. Describe what an editor's role is at Image for a book like this, because everyone thinks like, oh, Image creator owned. Creators don't like getting told by editors sort of like what to do. Yet you have an editor on this book. Like, what does he do in terms of the team?
among other things, he wears a few hats.
Mhm.
He is employed by us, by the creative team, by Greg specifically. Greg has a it's called Nervous Habit. He's got his own, I guess, corporate business entity. Alejandro is also the editor on Lazarus, on Black Magic, on the Old Guard, on all of that stuff. Among other things, he's the point of contact between us and Image, just to keep it streamlined, so that Image is not getting 100 emails from a bunch of wacky creatives about this one book. We can give it all to Alejandro, and he makes it nice and organized and pretty and sends it to them. He's the keeper of the schedule.
Okay.
And that is a thing that's been hugely important to us on this one. Lazarus has had scheduling problems since the beginning. Black Magic is at a bit of a stall point right now. Just it's on pause, I guess, is the best way of putting it. We're a weird price point. We're that weird oversized format. There's enough barriers to entry that a book that's chronically late is not a reputation we want to get. In the middle of writing issue 6 right now, and pretty sure most of 5 is drawn and inked at this point, and the first 4, or I think it's the first 4 issues are I believe colored and lettered too. We still have to do the credits page and the back matter and the letter column and all that stuff, but that's a couple days work kind of near the end. So the story content itself is pretty much locked down. I believe our plan is 3 monthly issues. Everything will be a 3-issue arc. And because they're oversized, essentially every 3 issues is a trade paperback worth of material. So it'll be 3 monthly issues, pause month, trade paperback, pause month, 3 monthly issues. And we feel like we can maintain that schedule going forward. And certainly it's not hurt by Mike being so fast. He's just so fast. So the idea is to just a fun book. We can get ahead of schedule. We're not killing ourselves getting it out the door. There's always kind of the last minute unforeseen, oh, we forgot this kind of stuff. Letter columns are a little tricky because nobody really writes into them anymore. Though I should say, and our letter column is hosted in character by the team's artificial intelligence, the evolved virtual intelligence / logistics system, Evil. So you can ask Evil your questions. We set up there's a QR code and a web link to where you can send your questions. And Evil also, she has her own Twitter page.
Of course she does.
I think it's just Ask Evil. I'll have to look it up. I set up the account, so God knows I don't remember the address. So yeah, Evil will be interacting hopefully with readers over the course of the series.
Fantastic.
That's one of the fun things about this setting too, right? Greg and I were talking about this the other day. I would lay money. I would bet the house that Greg actually came up with the AI's name being Evil, and he swears I did. Like, that's one of the fun things about this kind of collaboration. Is like everybody thinks everybody else came up with the cool bits. It's it's nice. It helps the final work feel kind of seamless, even though it's because sometimes 2 writers writing together, there's very clear break points between who's doing what. And Greg and I have been doing this so long that I don't feel those are as easy to spot. That we know each other well, and I feel like Greg and I are writing to impress each other and Mike. Like as long as the 3 of us think, oh, that's funny, or that's cool, or wow, that was a great scene. Like that's ideal. And hopefully readers will agree.
Yeah, because if you're having fun, it'll come through in the work. Before we get sort of too far away from The Forged, I want to talk a little bit about that format. It's oversized in terms of page count, but it's also oversized in terms of like physical presentation. How did the argument for getting an 8.5 by 11 book out, how did that argument get won?
I'm not sure there was an argument. For the first issue of Black Magic, we did a variant that was magazine format, and it was
Yep.
fun. It was really fun to put that together. The back matter, and I had all this room to play with to do, for example, that the standard. Here's the script page, and then here's the pencils, and then here's the inks and colors. That creative progression that shows up so often in collections and so on. I almost never like how they look. Usually it's just kind of a wall of text and then tiny little thumbnails of pencils, and maybe something gets a detail inset that's bigger. And a lot of that, I think, is just, until the last several years, you didn't see a lot of designers working on this kind of material. And I think there's a real advantage to it. Somebody who doesn't have to do 50,000 other books this month has time to make an attractive presentation. And I still think our script to final page progression in Black Magic #1 is one of the best ones I've ever seen. Despite the fact that it was me doing it, I can look at that objectively and go, that's much nicer than you normally see. So I was predisposed to that format from the beginning. And I had raised the issue with Greg, and I think the discussion was, you think that'll be cool? Yeah. All right, let's ask. And then we talked to Mike and said, how do you feel about this? He's like, oh, more room on the page with this many characters and this much going on? Gimme. He wanted it really bad. So it's like, okay, well, our artist is enthused about having a bigger canvas. We're enthused about being a little bit different than most stuff on the shelves. I mean, obviously the DC Comics, like Black Label stuff is out there, proving that, this can work. So we figured we'd ask Image, and Image went, okay, it'll mean that we have to do a little extra research to make sure we can get paper, because after the pandemic had started and the supply chain got disrupted, it was hard to get paper. And we weren't doing the same thing, so they couldn't like buy it in bulk or whatever. We were doing something slightly different. So it was, as long as we gave them lead time to get it done in a reasonably cost-effective way, they're, whatever. I don't think the Old Guard movie coming out and spurring giant sales on the trade paperbacks for the Old Guard hurt any. I think that they were like, hey, yeah, you're making us tons of dough. Do whatever you want. It's kind of how it worked. I wasn't part of those meetings with Image. Greg is just, they're in the same town, so he would just go over and talk to Eric Stevenson or whoever. My dealings with Image are largely with their production folks, and my experience working with them, because I'm the one always coming in with like oddball stuff, going, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? And they're just so easy to work with. They all love comics. They all enjoy the creation of comics. And so they don't seem too scared off when you come in and go, well, this is a little different than you normally do. They're great. Oh, let's do that. So yeah, it wasn't really an argument so much as a discussion amongst ourselves, like going, do we want to ask for this? And deciding, yes, we did. And then that Image going, yeah, all right, whatever. So cool. That worked out. I was gonna say, just given my druthers format wise, someday, like if the Foraged ends up being a massive hit or whatever, and we can convince Image to let us do it, I want to do a reprint of issue 1, like an old Marvel or DC Treasury, like those super large.
Oh yeah.
Like, I totally want to do one of those just to do it. I love that size. I love that format. That would be so much fun. We'll never get to do it. There's no way we're going to get to do it. That may be a thing where Image goes, oh, yeah, no. Shipping that alone would be, a pain in the butt, because Diamond's boxes are all sized to fit normal comics. Like, they'd have to do new boxes for it.
Yeah. Oh, man.